Before we get into Darren Bazeley and Tom Doyle, who rejoins us for the final episode of the season, we must give thanks, because without a number of people and a number of entities, the Unused Subs simply would not exist. And I've got to say a massive thank you, first of all, to Thomas Hackett over in Australia, Carl Tiley based in Wellington, with the Betcher crew, Ian Tane, TAB. Without their belief, without their funding, we would not exist today.
I also want to give a shout out to Mike Higgins and Kate Simmons from the Foley Hospitality Group. Them giving us Tyler Street each week has been fantastic. And then Amanda Wong from I Love Ugly coming in and sorting us out with some kit to wear on screen.
We use Tyler Street Sport every week, but it's the guys and girls in at the Brit next door down here in downtown Auckland that let us in and close up behind us. So to Barbara and to Andre and Jason and everybody at the Brit, thank you so much for dealing with our annoyance. A massive thank you to the players as well, the players and the coaches that have joined us throughout the season. Thanks to the Wellington Phoenix, Auckland FC and New Zealand Football for allowing us access to the players, and the viewers, the subscribers and the followers that have gotten right in behind the Unused Subs ever since we started up in early January. Spoon, it's all about that connection, isn't it? This is why we do it. We want to bring a connection between the fans of the New Zealand game and the players that are plying their trade, both locally but offshore as well.
Attacking that fly the Concord syndrome, mate. Yeah, got to have the players feeling well connected to New Zealand and not just being famous in their local markets.
Lastly, before we bring in Baze and Doyley, a huge thank you to you as well, Spoon, because, look, this year has been pretty tough for me. I've said that a number of times. Personally, I've said it probably way too many times to you. You've put up with my bullshit. You've entertained my stupid ideas. And, yeah, I seriously mean it. I don't know where I'd be if we didn't have this podcast. So without your backing, I'd be nowhere, mate. So I really appreciate your time and your passion and your efforts, man.
No, right back at you. I think for everyone at home, and firstly, thanks very much for that, mate. I think appreciation and gratitude is always a necessary part of a process, and I'm just going to pay it back in equal measure, because I think the way you've attacked the production and the career evolution, G,
that's what we'll call it.
Has been really kind of awe-inspiring at times, and the hours that you've put in to turn a raw conversation into an online product is really commendable, mate. So well done.
Well, let's do it all over again, and for the final time this first season, the inaugural season of the Unused Subs, as we bring in Tom Doyle for, I think, the fourth time. He's fast becoming a regular, and the All Whites head coach, Darren Bazeley.
No longer an unused sub, Tommy.
Hey everyone, it's Baze here on the Unused Subs, waiting for some good questions from Goran.
That's not going to happen. Only shit questions from me, mate.
Baze, excitement levels around, I guess, playing in and also hosting the SOCCEROOS in September. I mean, we've got the World Cup coming up, but this has clearly excited a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, they're great games for us. Any games against Aussie, it's going to be fierce, competitive. That edge is there, the rivalry is there. So it's just great games against, a good team, ranked pretty highly. So a great preparation for us for the World Cup. But I think the boys, after the recent games against the Aussies, they're waiting for their turn now. A little bit of comeback.
Saw the media release, Baze, and great decision to put one of the games at Go Media Stadium, Mount Smart, given what's been happening there over the course of the ALeague season with Auckland FC. But the first game's in Canberra. What the hell happened there? Because you've got opportunities in Sydney and in Melbourne, where there are lots of A-League teams. You've got the Brisbane Roar up there in Queensland. Canberra, what the hell's going on, man?
Well, you need to speak to the Aussies.
I will.
That wasn't on us. They wanted to play there, so we'll go wherever they want to play us. But
they're taking you down into a deep, dark hole because they're scared of you.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
How do these games come about? Is it driven from you talking with coaching staff, or has it come from, I guess, the federations? How do they kind of come about, these games?
Yeah, I mean, every game comes about differently. The Aussie game has been something that I think everybody's been pushing for a number of years, to try and get those regular games. And then the Ashes, came up. Now, and that's something that I think everybody wants to play regularly. So, yeah, it came through probably higher level than me. It wasn't me saying I want those games. That's not how it works.
You had a lot of say.
Yeah, not quite. But no, I think they're great. It's great games, and it's great for us to play at home again, because that's always difficult securing home games. It should capture the imagination of the fans as well, which is great,
Yeah.
and great to send it to Go Media.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I don't pretend to know everything about your career and your career, Spoon, but I'm assuming at some point along the way you may have played against the Aussies, and what does that bring out of you when you go trans-Tasman as an All-White?
You're definitely talking to the wrong guy.
You didn't do it?
I never played
you
against
do
the
it?
Aussies, no.
First claim to fame, a little bit of a self-brag, but I've actually beaten Ange Postecoglou twice, and it was with the under-20s. And it took Goldie to remind me about this, Baze, that we actually went over there and we knocked off a team with Nathan Burns, Bruce Jitte, Dario Vidicic, Tommy Orr was down the left, you had Tando Valapi in goal, Sparanovic at the back. It was a good team. And I completely forgot that Ange Postecoglou was the coach. So I'm chucking that back on the CV now. The most recent time that I've played them, though, was before the Olympics. And that was at the North Sydney Oval. Packed house. I think it was something like 25,000 people there. And it's intense, mate. Like, you're immediately on not the defensive, but you're prepared for a real tough confrontation and the spikiness that the Aussies bring. We were down 2-0, we got back to 2-2 and then lost it 3-2 right at the death. I won't say who, but I actually got spat on in that game by an A-League striker, and it was
You were spat on?
Right in front of Strebray Dolowski, the former head of referees for the A-League.
You're not going to name names,
I'm not
mate. It's
going
the
to, mate.
season
And-
finale.
mate,
Now
I
is the time to name names, Jacob
ropeable. I
Spoonley.
was absolutely ropeable and I collared him. But this is in the last couple of minutes. And even though they're winning, that's the kind of feeling that goes into these ones. You never want to back down.
So you're giving us a bit of homework. So if there's vision of you collaring somebody, that's the guy who spat on you.
Actually,
So I've just got to go back through the archives.
So there's going to be a VHS there somewhere. I've got no idea where it is.
Bit of GST Spooners these days, I reckon.
The sort of game though, Doyle, you'd have quite liked this.
I would have
game.
loved that. Yeah,
I could picture you in a.
That could have been my
New
last
Zealand
game.
Aussie game. not sure how long you might have stayed on the pitch, but
Permanent red card, Tom Doyle. Never come back to the pitch again. Look, when you look at the two sides, the Australian side, the Socceroos, is made up of a lot of A-League players. They're either still plying their trade in the A-League or they've come through that system. What does that mean for the quality of football down in this part of the world that is the case, and the Socceroos have qualified for their 6th straight World Cup?
yeah, I mean they've got some good players. They've got a lot of players offshore as well. But when you look at our squads, we've got A-League through our squad as well. The A-League's doing really well. There's a lot of good players playing in the league, and there's a lot of players moving as well from the league. So it's definitely a league that other people around the world are watching, looking to secure these young players with potential, as we've seen recently with our own batch. Finn, Alex, and Oldie guys, the most recent. So it's a great early starting place for young players.
It's interesting, actually. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this, because I remember when you were involved in the All Whites, when I was there as well, it was almost like this rotating who's going to be in the squad. There's 10 new players coming in, and it feels like you've got this set core of players now that are going to be there every trip,
true.
And showing up. Is that something that's enabled you to be able to, I guess, form more of a constant with the All Whites? Because it does feel like they are that at the moment. We're back maybe 10 years ago, it was a lot less.
I think we're lucky. We're blessed with a real good group of players, and I think, whilst it's not easy selecting squads, I think it's there is a core group, like you say, that have been pretty consistent with their selection, and probably most people would pick 90% the same squad, and then there's always a few differences each tour. So we've built depth in every position, but some of our players are doing really, really well, and don't pick themselves, but because there's still the form and fitness that comes into selections. But yeah, it's been pretty consistent, and that allows us to have that real cohesiveness.
Yeah, and just speaking of that consistency, I guess, do you have much say now? Probably a big question to ask, but in terms of players coming off contract, obviously there's a year to go till the World Cup. There's players that maybe not getting game time. Do you have those conversations in the off season saying, look, it's probably a time to get a move, get closer to home, get game time? Or what are those conversations look like?
Sarpreet, Ben Wayne.
There's a
if
few.
we're naming names, unlike Jacob Spoonley from earlier.
Yeah. You know, I speak to the players regularly around their environments and stuff, but if I'm honest, they've all got agents, you know, and their agents are doing what their job is, and that's to make sure their players are in the best environment they can be. You know, every player wants to be playing, but they also want to be earning good money and being in good environments. So there's a balance. I think you're right that we've got a few players at the moment that will move clubs. Hopefully that happens in the next few weeks, and you know, they get their new home and they start playing, and you know, we move forward from there. But yeah, I speak to them, but how much influence I can have is probably limited.
Spoon, just going back to Doyley's point about the consistency of selection in the last few years, I think 14 of those players in that squad to Canada, they played in the 2022 Intercontinental Playoff game. And Tim Payne would have been there had he not had a pregnant partner. So that just underlines and underscores that consistency of the squad, right?
It does, and I think that's something that has traditionally been a real structural issue. And so Baze can talk to this in a lot greater detail than I can, but it's something that, as part of the reviews that happen after every World Cup, you look at it and you try and understand, you know, what are the big pieces that you need to address. And through no fault of anyone's, it was that there was really high rotation because people were coming off contract, they didn't have clubs. So you're either kind of, I don't want to say being philanthropic because you never did that with the national team, but there were players that weren't playing and being selected for the national team. And I think the one thing that became quite obvious is that if you can embed these kind of relationships, because let's remember that is it only 5 times a year you get the squad together?
Yeah.
So these are really limited
yeah.
opportunities, and I guess it's about developing those kind of relationships and the culture, which I want to get to in a second, Baze, and the great work that's been done there. But that's one of the things that I think a lot of work's been done in. And kind of the focus has been on that base. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. You know, we've got players now that have, you know, gone and forged careers in top places around the world and doing really well, you know, and everybody knows those players, and they get selected for most of our camps. So I think because we have limited opportunity to get together, we don't get, you know, and then every window we might only get 3 training sessions. So the consistency really helps. You know, we're not starting again every tour. You know, we might be up speeding or bringing a couple of players up to speed, like recently with Callan Elliott and Bill Tuiloma. Nick Zanev were sort of the recent additions to that squad, but it allows us to just pick up from where we've just come from in the last window and continue sort of moving forward. And that's what we've tried to sort of say to the group every window. We just need to keep moving forward. Not the finished article now, but we're definitely further ahead than we were last window or a year ago or 2 years ago, and we're getting there.
The Te whānau aspect of New Zealand football and the All Whites, we've spoken to a number of players throughout the course of this inaugural season of the Unused Subs, and the ones that are offshore, they love that aspect of getting back together because it reminds them of home. Or what kind of focus is placed on that over, say, you know, actual football coaching, because these are world-class professionals and they don't need actual coaching, do they?
No, we can't make them fitter. You know, we can't make them technically better because we've got 3 training sessions before a game.
Base, that's for sure.
Maybe. So you're right. Like the heavy emphasis on culture, you know, and bringing the players back together and connecting them back to New Zealand, connecting them back to each other, connecting them back to the style of play and the team, you know, to the All Whites whakapapa, you know, previous players. You know, we do a lot of work in that area, and you know, it's the best part of camp life, bringing all the Kiwis together. They love it, you know. They all live around the world, and most of them have lived away from New Zealand for so long now that those moments, you know, 5 times a year for most of them, when they come together is great. You know,
I guess it's a massive credit to you as well, because to be able to get these guys like Chris Wood that we've spoken about to actually want to come back every window and play for the national team. I know he loves scoring goals and breaking records, which probably has a lot to do with it as well, but you know, I do remember back when Spoons and I was playing there, it was a massive honour to be called up, but it does feel now that it's like you can see the players really, really want to be there, and there's something special about this team going to this World Cup. Yeah, I mean, they're a great group of lads to work with, you know, and we do everything we can as staff to ensure that they're prepared and that they're organised and that, you know, that their time is their time, you know. So we get together for that
8 days normally. In that we're playing 2 games, so we wrap around enough preparation for the games with regards to opposition information, that they can take on. The rest of it is around ensuring that the culture's there, ensuring that the connection's there, and we're lucky. We've got good staff as well, and we've got people like Rowley and that have been involved for so long, so we've got a lot of history and experience with us. But we also lean on some experts around different environments. We've got a cultural expert that we work with here around how we can integrate certain things to help connect players quicker and better.
Doyley mentioned Chris Wood, and he's probably the biggest piece of that jigsaw puzzle that you're putting together ahead of the World Cup. But he's got a massive year ahead of him, given what Nottingham Forest just achieved in the Premier League. Their highest finish in the English pyramid for the last 30 years, and therefore the coach has been given the extension. So it's going to be another massive year in the Premier League for Chris Wood. How do you go about managing him through this 12-month period with the international windows and the like? And Tom saying he loves playing for New Zealand. He loves banging in those goals and picking up those records. But at some point, do you pump the brakes for him and say, we actually need you fit and firing and mentally ready for the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, it's individual needs almost for every player, and you'll have seen, some of the work we've done with Woodsy recently, on the recent tour where we really limited his training loads and his minutes he played. That wasn't my decision. That was in conjunction with him, and the staff as well, to go what's best for him. And he's just come off an unbelievable season where he played so many games, the most he's ever played in a season. And it's important that he's there with us. He knows that, and he always wants to be there. He doesn't want to miss out on those connection moments with the players. But we have to be careful of minutes. And when you look back to March, when we sort of made some decisions around Finn Sermon, we looked at that as an individual needs. Should Finn Sermon have been in the squad? Yes. He's good enough to be selected, but it wasn't the right timing for him in regards to what was happening at his club. And it was more important that he embedded himself at Portland in the first team. And had we taken him away for those 10 days, he would have missed probably 2 games, might have lost his starting place in the team. And so we left him there. And again, that was in conjunction with Finn and his club coaches. And now he's a regular player for Portland, and you've just seen what he performed for us. So we end up with a better player because we make some decisions on individual needs basis.
Baze, I think what you just touched on there is a luxury that I think very few All Whites coaches have ever had, which is breadth and depth. So the ability to change things, have versatility within the ranks, but also alternates and other options if someone in the starting 11 goes down. You've touched on the consistency, which I think is key to all of the success that we're seeing at the moment. But just give people an idea here, because this is one of the questions I always have to answer when I'm talking about the All Whites. How wide is this group that you're kind of actively monitoring, and perhaps even those that are just playing professional football overseas? Because I think that's the most exciting thing, as much as all of this.
I'd say we're monitoring around 60 players, probably more than that, because we've got a lot of younger players that are now in that sort of under-20s environment that are now professionals. So there's probably a few more than 60, but I'd say it's normally around 60 players that we monitor on a weekly basis. How they're playing, the minutes they're getting. We get videos. I've got a great analyst that we work with, so I can sort of say I need to see this player, this player, this player, and he'll put together like a 7-8 minute video clip of that player in certain games. So we can keep up to speed and monitor quite a few players and keep an eye on them, and then sort of keeping in touch with them pretty regularly around how they're going around the world. It's some of the time differences are a bit difficult, but nowadays with your WhatsApp and everything,
the time zones are a killer.
But what's the worst time that you've had to be up in the morning and get on a call with somebody?
Yeah, phone calls we don't necessarily do in the middle of the night, but sometimes I watch live games in the middle of the night, and but that's fine. It's it's not really working watching football games. When I'm watching Premier League games now and calling it work, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Are you travelling as well to these places? Or you're able to
not very
watch
often.
Yeah.
Most of the games we can watch or get highlights or get. I don't necessarily like watching highlights, so that's why we get our analysts to go through Y-Scout and get all the players' actions. Yeah. So he knows the key actions of a player, so I can ask for Andre de Jong in South Africa and say, can we watch him from his last 2 games and watch all of his actions, good and bad? So it's not just the highlight sort of stuff of him scoring a goal. It's we get a really good idea of how he's going. And yeah, there's, like I say, there's probably around 60 players around the world that are on the whiteboard, as we sort of say, with their name up there. And they're all options. And then every time we get together to select a squad, we literally talk about every position, every player. And that's not just me. It's a sort of a group sort of selection process.
When you look at the 12 months that we'll be at the World Cup in a year from now, it's a long enough period of time for a player, one of your 60 players that aren't in the all-white squad at the moment, to force their hand and sort of state their case. And the example I want to bring up is Ben Old. Now, before his incredible season with the Wellington Phoenix, which landed him the gig in Saint Etienne, he was hampered by injury, he wasn't getting regular game time, and then he hits the ground running, puts in one hell of a shift, and he's off. So of those players from outside of the core group of players that we've spoken about, who have you really got your eye on? If you were to say, all right, keep an eye on this one because he could force his way into a World Cup squad, who would it be?
Oh man,
not trying to put pressure on a person, but
it's possible for any of them. Some of them we're monitoring and they're playing in a certain level of league around the world, and they need to maybe step up and get a move to a new league to really sort of push past some of the players we have. So they're still being monitored, but it's not necessarily what they're doing on a week-to-week basis that could actually force their way in right now. They'd need to get that move. But, there are some players, like there's still the boy Dibley Diaz over in England at Fulham. If he suddenly makes Fulham's first team, you suddenly have to pick him. He's a Premier League player. I'm not saying he will make Fulham's first team, but he's currently a professional right there. We did bring him in 18 months ago before, for a window. He's sort of committed to New Zealand. He's got options, but he has committed, and he's an exciting player that's still potential, still young and potential. So we're waiting for a few to break through. It could happen, but your example with Ben Old was, he played for the All Whites 3 years ago, so he was always on the radar, but he did have that breakout season at the Phoenix and put himself on the map and got his moves. And then we're still, Ryan Thomas. Would you class Ryan Thomas as someone breaking through, but he's still a real good option that I speak to regularly, and he's
how close is he?
He's a very good player, obviously, firstly. He's always said to me, I've been speaking to him for years, not just when I've had the job, we keep in touch regularly. And he's always said he just needs to be fully fit for 6 months to even contemplate taking on extra loading. And I think that's fair enough, for what he's been through. He's close to that now. He's close to having a 3 or 4 months good fitness where he feels good playing over at Peck. So right now he's sort of saying, see how I go pre-season, see how I start the season. Let's keep the conversation going. And I've always said I think we'll see Ryan in a white shirt again.
It's interesting, even people like Costa, and look, I'm not saying it's the reason he moved and left the Phoenix, because there's great players down there, but seeing some of these moves happen, I saw, obviously Costa leave, but then even think about players, we were talking about Ben Old having a great season at the Phoenix, then leaving, and then looking at Ollie Sale, who had a great year with the Phoenix and then moved to a team that was struggling. So you wonder if in his mind he's thinking, do I need to get out of Perth, or because he obviously didn't make the last squad, right? So there's players like that who went from being perceived as the top class players in New Zealand to then being in a team that wasn't doing as well. Does that change the perception, or I guess in your mind, is it how well a player does or a team does, or are you kind of fixed on how they perform when they come into that All Whites team as well?
I think there's so many considerations that take place regarding what they're currently doing, how fit they are, what's their form like, the level of football they're playing at, but also what they've done for us, in the recent tours, and then there's also, how their fit is. Obviously, we pick a squad of 23, 24 players, but then there's a starting 11, and then there's subs that come on, and so you've got this squad of, say, 23 players, 11 of them are going to start. They're all options, but some of them also bring other attributes to the squad. you know, in regards to the culture and how they help other players within the squad. You know, Tommy Smith's a great example of what he brings to the shirt and to the environment. You know, he's still an option to play. Of course he is. He's still got to be selected for an all-white squad. You've still got to be good enough to play. But what else do you bring as well? You know, so there's lots of considerations that go into picking players. You know, the form, fitness, the partnerships. You know, positionally. You know, we can't take all defenders or all attackers. So there's this real balance that goes on. In regards to picking a squad.
It must be heightened now as well. We're looking at that 23, 24, and then looking at the other side of it, right? That 5% that are really, really close, and those calls that you have to make. Obviously, it must be difficult, but massively heightened now with the World Cup on the line. I mean, is that something you have a team to help deal with? Speaking of these players, I mean, what's the process there, or is it...
Leave it to HR?
Yeah.
No.
Human resources.
Spooners and I have had too many of these calls to know what it's like.
No, I think that's my job. You know, I'll always try and speak to as many players as I can and have those conversations. And I've always felt like just be honest with a player. You know, players just want honesty and they want to know why or why not. You know, they're involved. So I think over the years, because I've been involved, you know, with the All Whites so long, you know, going back to your time, which is quite a long time.
You're so old.
It's a long time ago.
So old.
No, but also, you know, through my involvement with the 17s and the 20s, I've got pretty good relationships with most of this group, this wider squad. So, I can talk to them pretty honestly, and, you know, I think they appreciate that.
Has anyone ever reacted not how you had expected? Because difficult conversations must be happening all the time, given the international windows throughout the course of your tenure. Has anyone said, F you, Bazeley. You know, I've been doing everything I can in my power to make this squad, and you've just dashed my hopes and dreams, man.
Yeah. No, if I'm honest, I get more the other way, where they take things really well. I get surprised at that because I remember maybe what I'd be like, or Doyley might be different. But I think that's why I think the relationships I have with players allows me to have good conversations with them, be pretty honest, and I think most of them appreciate that, you know. And I've not had anybody at this stage sort of react badly. And like I say, I get a bit more surprised when they react really well, and no one's going to thank me for it, but you know, to have a sort of good conversation sort of surprises me sometimes.
So how would Darren Bazeley, the player, react when he was left out of a squad then?
It was a bit different back in my day, and I'm not sure
that old crutch.
I'm not sure the coaches
were
so maybe honest, and yeah. So you always felt like you were getting told, and it was all done differently. You know, it was different. It was a different era.
What you're saying is you were quite happy to split the dummy.
Not all the time, maybe sometimes. But I think it's like everything, you know, whatever you're doing, you learn along the way. You learn the good, you learn the bad, and you take the good and you try and make it better, and you don't do what you didn't like back in the days. So, yeah, I've always tried to speak. I mean, obviously, you know, when I'm talking about 60 players, I don't speak to every single player every time, but I know roughly, you know, this group of players who. The players that feel like they're in a real good shout of being selected, they need to be spoken to. You know, they're the ones that I sort of concentrate on.
You say that you learn things along the way. One of the guys that you would have learnt a lot from is the former England manager, Graham Taylor, who took charge of you at Watford.
Yeah.
Now, he failed in his ambitions to take England to the 94 World Cup. You're heading to the World Cup in charge of New Zealand. From your dealings with him, you know, as a friend, as a player under his tutelage, what can you impart into your players? That knowledge that you have with that experience with Graham.
Well, you know, he was the best, Graham. You know, the best manager person I ever worked with. You know, like he got to, you know, now they teach you on courses, get to know your players, you know, because you can get more out of your players when you get to know them. But, you know, he was doing that a long time ago, and he knew your wife's name, your girlfriend's name, your dog's name. You know, he could talk to you on a level that was unusual back in that day, where he just cared. Your players felt like he cared about them, and then you'd work for him. You know, he was great. He was a great man, Graham. You know, a lot of his morals and standards have lived with a lot of us that worked under him, you know, forever. You know, don't cut corners. You know, he had loads of different like sayings and stuff, but you know what I suppose the cut was, you should do things properly. Do things properly. Don't cut corners. You know, and you'll get more out of it. You know, and it was like you're doing the yo-yo test, and if you cut the line by like an inch, you know, stop short of the inch, well, you're cutting corners, and you know, don't do that.
They used to do that as well, didn't they? Remember, you guys used to have it. There'd be someone
Don't
secretly
say you
waiting
guys.
on the
Don't
line.
say you guys.
Us guys.
No,
There used to be someone waiting on the line, and if you
Yeah.
went short,
Yeah.
they'd make you do the whole yo-yo test
Doyley,
and go,
all the way to the line,
yeah,
Doyley.
you got to do it again. You didn't do it. You're like,
Yeah.
fuck it.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah.
Baze, you spoke with admiration there about Graham Taylor. But I suppose the other thing is, for you personally, this is quite a massive moment, preparing to go to a World Cup. So give people an insight. What's been special for you over the last 6 or so months as we go from qualifying and now getting to a World Cup?
I mean, probably everything. I love the job. And we're lucky. We've got great players, we've got great staff. It's a great job that I really enjoy. I'll be honest, I don't think it's really sunk in about the World Cup yet. I haven't probably given myself a chance to think around we're going to be at the World Cup. You know, obviously there's a lot of talk about it, and we plan for it. But yeah, it's amazing, you know. But I just love the job. You know, we're working in football. Like I say, I'm working with some top players around the world. When you look at obviously Woodsy, but you know, you look at Libby and Tyler Binden and Stamanic, and you know, these guys, they're very, very good players, and they're just great lads to work with. So it sort of make my job easy. And I've got good staff around me, so I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah,
What
we
do you
can
want
see
the
how
team-
much you enjoy it.
What do you
mate.
want the team to be? Sorry about that, mate.
No, it's all good.
What do you want the team to be known as going to this World Cup? I remember thinking back to the 2010 World Cup. You think defensively, right? Like that's the first thing that pops into my mind. But I mean, you've got a massive chance to leave a mark on this team on the international stage, on the biggest stage in world football. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on how that?
Yeah,
looks?
I mean, this team. I work with the players a lot around what they want to be seen like. You know, obviously, you know, I'm the coach and stuff, but actually, it's their team. You know, and we've done a lot of work over the last few years around how do you want to play? How do you guys want to be seen? And you see patches of it. You know, the possession base. You know, but attacking as well. You know, they want to play football. We've got players that can play football. You know, when you've got Joe Bell in the middle of midfield with Marco Stamanic and, you know, Tyler and Boxy and, you know, Libby there, you know, the guys are going to go and play. They're going to play football, and let alone all of our attackers that we have, with Sarpreet and Callum and Eli and Garbett, you know, and then you got Woodsy up top. And I'm missing players out there. You know, there's lots of good players that, you know, so they're going to go and play, and they want to show that style. And they also they don't want to let opposition teams dominate or play their style. So they want to disrupt and, you know, be aggressive defensively as well, and make a mark. You know, they don't want to be underdogs anymore, and they don't feel like underdogs. We don't feel like we're underdogs anymore. The rankings are whatever they are. You know, 80, we've probably moved up, I think, to 83 maybe now, which is good. But you know, when we come up against an Ivory Coast team that are, you know, 40, 41, I think they were, the boys didn't feel like underdogs.
Yeah.
You know, we're sort of comfortable other teams feeling like that, because then we can have that element of surprise. But I think every team we've played, you know, have come away and gone, oh, they're not a bad team. You know, they play some good football, and they're going to be one to watch. You know, it's not all come together yet. You know, we still had things, even in the, you know, Côte d'Ivoire game, you know, things we could do better. But I think a lot of our possession from deep and our build-up play was pretty secure. It was safe and controlled, and we were getting into certain areas, and then it was breaking down a little bit too often, and the players acknowledged that at half-time, tried to fix a few things, which was good. But I mean, the hardest thing in football is scoring goals, and, you know, getting those moments in front of goal, and that's definitely something that the team are working on. They know they've got a Premier League goal scorer. Yeah. So, you know, a big work on for us recently over the last year has been getting the ball into certain areas and then delivering, and having more consistency with that delivery, because we know we've got somebody that can score goals.
How hard is it to make the step up when you play in the Oceania Confederation and then you're playing against the likes of a Ukraine or a Côte d'Ivoire or Norway with Erling Haaland in October of this year.
Yeah.
When we see the All Whites play against Oceania nations, you can absolutely assert your authority and play that on the ball style, but then when you come up against Ukraine, you might be more defensively minded. So I suppose I'm asking in a roundabout way that the age-old thing of what about New Zealand getting out of this confederation to play against top quality opposition more regularly? And we spoke about Australia earlier. Case in point, they leave Oceania, and maybe there's a little bit of suffering in the short term, but ultimately long term, they're qualifying for World Cups. Their ranking has risen. They're in the top 26 in the world. So what about those conversations? Fans are obviously having them every so often.
Yeah.
Are they being had within the walls of New Zealand football?
That's the
If I'm
longest
honest,
question
like
ever.
Yeah, I'll cut it down in the edit, mate. I'll cut it down in the edit. It won't be anywhere near as long as
He's not
that.
getting a good question. If I'm honest, like the OFC qualifiers, they were 5 games. So when you look at, if people say, oh, but you don't get a chance to play higher opposition, well, we've just played Côte d'Ivoire, Ukraine, we played USA, we played Mexico, we played Egypt, we played Tunisia, Republic of Ireland, Greece, Australia. We've played quite a lot of good games, and then we've had to go through the OFC's qualifiers where we're playing lesser ranked teams. I think the challenge for us in this last window, I was really interested to see where we were at, and we sort of said this to the players, this is a real good opportunity, like a checkpoint for us. It's a new chapter. We've just come through OFC and even the Nations Cup before that. So we'd probably played 10 of the previous 12 games against lower ranked opposition where we were the favourites, we had most possession, we scored lots of goals and we won games. And it was actually, it was good to win games, but that becomes a habit as well. But it was interesting for me to see where we were going from all of those OFC games where we'd been pretty dominant into these games against better opposition. And I think everyone was pretty, not surprised, but I think we were pleasantly surprised at where we were at, and that we were able to have moments in games against Ivory Coast and Ukraine where we were still able to do certain things. I don't think it's been a bad thing for us. We did treat those games differently. The OFC games are differently to the challenge we're facing now. The rest of the year is going to be against higher ranked opposition, top 40 teams in the world, and then the World Cup's going to be the same. So, we do have to treat those games differently. And I think within the OFC stuff, we did a great job. The boys did the job, got the job done, and they're all aware that, that was different. It doesn't mean we're a certain team. It means we did our job here, we qualified for the World Cup, now we can move on. Now we have to do it against better teams more consistently.
I agree with Baze, because why would you...
Don't jump in and say
Why would you go to Asia when you can go to the World Cup? I do, man. Why would you go to Asia when you've got the ability to get direct...
to a World Cup.
Not direct route, you still have to win. But it just doesn't...
It's a hell of a lot easier, though.
Okay, great point, Tom. Baze, we've had it from a couple of the lads that you're pretty even, and your coaching style, as you say, is quite facilitative and allowing people to express themselves. I have also heard that the changing room at halftime against New Caledonia, you got a bit sterner with them. So there was a bit of a gear change. So can you take us inside the changing room and just kind of explain to people, because I think that was a really interesting point. We're at the intersection of expectation and also handling the moment around managing that expectation. And I think that's probably something that will be looked back on in a couple of years' time as being a footnote, a low-key piece of quality to get us out of a sticky situation, 0-0 at halftime against New Cali.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty calm as staff. I've got Simon Elliott and Tony Reddins around me. So we're pretty level-headed as staff, and we knew, whilst we could sort of feel that bit of frustration around the crowd at Eden Park, and we knew we wanted to be winning at half-time, but we always sort of felt, we always knew we were still in control of the game, and we were just waiting for moments. And when you look back at the first half of that game, Woodsy's had chances, Marco's had chances off the line, we've had a lot of chances, we just didn't have that moment. So I never felt any panic, I never felt at risk in that game. And then at half-time, I just felt like it just felt a little bit flat. So I just felt like we needed to
rack up.
I wouldn't say rack up. We just needed to remind people that this is a World Cup qualifier, you know, and whilst there's a little bit of frustration around the crowd, you know, being 0-0, we've got a job to do. We made a couple of probably strong decisions and made a couple of changes. And, you know, when I look back, we played really well in Wellington against Fiji and that night. And we looked at the selections and we felt like that team did so well with the start of the game that we could go again. And it didn't quite work out for a couple of those players. So, yeah, we sort of thought we need to make early changes and start the second half strongly. And so we did make the changes at half time, and I think it worked quite well. You know, sometimes you do need to do something as coaches, you know, to instigate a reaction. And yeah, it was good half time. I think like every half time is different. But we're pretty calm and level-headed anyway. You know, we get video clips that we can see and talk to the players around what we can do better. I wouldn't call it an old-fashioned rack up at all.
Baze is trying to figure out who's ratted him out to you. That's what's going on.
No, I think the players have said, and they were aware that, you know, come half-time we just needed to reset ourselves a little bit and go back out in the second half and, you know, assert ourselves on the game, which is what we did.
Let's look ahead to the World Cup, because we're all so excited about that possibility and what we might achieve there. Only the third time in our history that we're going to a World Cup, and the way that the goalposts have kind of shifted, there are more teams, there are more groups, there are more teams that will qualify for a knockout phase. And so you have the potential to play 4 games, 5 games, who knows? How do you think this All Whites team will fare in this kind of World Cup?
I mean, it's exciting. First off, you know, until we know the draw, you know, we don't know who we're facing. But whoever we're facing, you know, the boys will attack it. You know, it's a challenge. Obviously, it's going to be a hard challenge, but they're going into it wanting to do well. They obviously know 2010 they were undefeated. So that, you know, we want to go into this and we want to win games. We want to qualify and get into the knockout phase where, you know, anyone involved in football knows anything could happen. To do that, we're going to have to win and draw a minimum out of those 3 group games. So, yeah, it'd be interesting, exciting to see the draw, who's in that draw and who's in our group. But yeah, like I say, whoever it is, we still need to go there knowing that we need to, you know, win a game of football. If you don't win a game of football at the World Cup, then we won't progress.
Who do you want, Baze? Like, if you had like a wish, you've spoken to the genie and said, I want this team, this team, this team in my group. Who would those 3 nations be?
Man, I don't know. When you ask that, I wouldn't have a clue. It'd be nice to play a big fish. You know, nice to play a Brazil or a Spain or an England. It should be cool, but you know that sometimes the harder, the better. But
What about USA opening game?
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. You know, Mexico, we wear some dust-ups with Mexico, which is always great. Got a few memories with them.
We've spoken about that on the podcast.
Don't start Costa. Whatever you do, don't recall Michael McGlinchey.
We just sent Boxy in. Now we've had some good games with Mexico. So yeah, if we end up with a Mexico in an opening game, you know, I think whatever game it is, the players are not going to be overwhelmed. You know, they're going to go into it with a different thinking of we can go in and win this game. You know, we still have to go and perform. It's not as easy as that, just going into a game thinking we'll win, and so you know that. But I think there's a different mentality around this group. You know, they believe in themselves, they believe in each other, and they know that we're still going to be addressed as underdogs by everybody else around the world. But I think a few people are starting to see that this team's got some good players. You know, they're starting to get results, and the more windows we can have where, you know, we've just come off the back of beating the African champions, which has never happened, where we've beaten a Confederation champion, you know, and that's good. But we won't get too carried away with that, because it was just a window. It wasn't a World Cup group. You know, but I think what we've said to the players now is that all that result does is just gives us within the camp more belief, the players more belief that they can go into an international game against a higher ranked opposition and perform and win. Yeah, because we've been there closely with Republic of Ireland, where we drew away from home, Tunisia, where we drew, USA, where we drew. So we've competed against these top teams, but we haven't crossed that line and beaten any of them. Well, now we have, and I'm not saying that's going to happen at every window, but the belief is growing that we can now live with these teams.
You're talking about belief and attitude and change of mentality within the group. I suppose what is the way that manifests? What are kind of the, let's say, three key defining qualities of this team that we can expect to see at the World Cup?
I mean, confidence is massive. We've got confident players that believe in their own ability, but I think now we've gone and beaten a good team. You know, that confidence can just grow in that what we're doing can work. You know, so yeah, hopefully we'll see a group full of, you know, confident players, positive. I think, you know, we don't want to be a team that just sits back and waits for a team to beat us. You know, we want to be super positive, proactive, you know, front foot, aggressive with the ball and without the ball. So, yeah, I think when you get to the World Cup, if we just sit back, I mean, there was elements within the, you know, Côte d'Ivoire game that we were like that, and we were defending really well, and we soaked up pressure. But I think if you start a game like that, then you're just waiting to be beaten, and you know you can't consistently get results by just doing that. So this team want to be different. You know, they do want to be front foot, and they want to go and try and win games of football. If we end up defending, you know, like we did against Côte d'Ivoire for the last 20 minutes, you know, and I thought we managed the game really well. But when you look at the depth of the squad, when we're winning a game 1-0 and it's sort of 78 minutes and we're bringing on Chris Wood and Michael Boxall, then I think that shows the you know, the team that, okay, you're bringing on Boxy here and we're closing the game, and they did that really well, and we changed the shape a little bit and managed the game really well. Every game is different, but yeah, we definitely this team want to go out and play and try and win games.
What do you prefer? Speaking of Boxy, do you prefer a 4 at the back or 3 at the back?
No, 4 at the back.
4 at the
you
back.
know, but I mean, I'm sort of with formations. I think if you could stop a game at any point watching us, and you'd say we're playing 3 at the back, 2 at the back, 4 at the back, 5 at the back. You know, and that's pretty much any team in the world. I think there's so much rotation and flexibility now within shape. You know, you've seen us. We've got Libby in our team. Libby's not going to be a defender that a fullback that sort of sits there and defends.
I was going to say that.
He wants to be attacking.
He liked to get forward as well.
No, he did. Doyley was a good player.
I just couldn't get back.
And when you did, you put the ball in your own net.
So, you know, whilst we play 4 at the back let's say we play with Libby and Tim Payne, those two guys are not going to sit in a back 4. They're going to be high, so they're going to be part of a front 4 or a front 3 or a front 5. You know, if you go, we've got Woodsy and 2 inverted wingers.
Hang on, I feel like you're giving us the starting 11. I'm just going to start making notes here.
You know, that's the way.
So we've got Libby and Tim.
That's the way we've played almost every game. And again, with the players, we've said, like, what the players wanted. They didn't want to keep changing shape. They didn't want to keep changing our game plan for opposition teams. They don't want us to play guided on what the opposition do. They want to try and force our style of play on opposition teams. So, yeah, I mean, we don't change too much. There's little tweaks in the formation and the style of play every game, depending on the opposition, mostly when the opposition have the ball. But when we've got the ball, we're trying to do certain things. And you can't ask Libby to stay back and defend the whole game. He's going to get forward. But, you know, the way we have now with Joe Bell and Marko Stamenic in that sort of 2-6s role, you know, where we do end up with at times, you know, look like a back 3 with one of those guys, or an Alex Rufer.
You can't play 3 defensive central midfielders, mate.
So, you know, at times against Ukraine and Côte d'Ivoire, we had Joe Bell or Marko sitting between the 2 centre-backs and our full-backs high and our inverted wingers inside, you know, and build up with a box build-up, or Joe or Marko rolling out into a full-back position and building up slightly differently. So, yeah, I think, you know, yeah, we play 4-3-3, but there's lots of rotations within that 4-2-3-1, and any stage it could look differently. Yeah. But against Côte d'Ivoire, we did go to a back 3.
I didn't notice that.
Sorry, back 5.
Trying to figure out how to squeeze that in, but you covered it.
When it comes to the starting 11, you've mentioned the back 3 or back 2, there are so many top quality central defenders that you've got to choose from. I've got no idea what the right combination is.
Yeah.
You as the head coach, it falls on your shoulders. What way are you leaning at the moment? Because you've got these young guys coming through, Tyler Bindon, Finn Sermon, then you've got the reliability of a Michael Boxall and Tommy Smith. Nando Pinecker is somewhere in the mix as well.
Yeah.
What way are you thinking for all of those five?
The beauty is we don't need to right now. You know, we go window to window and we pick squads. The last game we went with Tyler and Finn as 2 centre-backs, which was harsh on Boxy because he scored that winning goal back in March and he's been so consistent with us. But, we wanted to give Finn that game and he performed really well. Then we wanted to bring Boxy back in and we moved Tyler to right back, but he's played pretty regularly at times for Reading. But it's tough. It is getting hard. You could say you've got 3-4 centre-backs, so why don't you play 3? But then you sacrifice one of the other players. And if we play 3 centre-backs, who are you going to leave out? You're going to leave Sarpri out? You're not going to play with a 10? So that's where we don't really want to get into changing shape all the time because, like I say, we have a window. We get 3 training sessions. In fact, when we're here in New Zealand, because of the travel and the time difference, we've got players arriving on Wednesday for a Friday game. So we get 1 training session. So we can't suddenly play a new shape and then have 1 training session to try and get everybody to understand what we're doing. So we're pretty consistent with the style of play. And we will make tough decisions based on form, fitness, what we think is the best partnership, because anything you do, you lose something. You gain something, you lose something. You gain an extra centre-back, you lose an attacker, and then maybe we might be more solid defensively, but then we won't score goals. So we're trying to find what's our best way for us to play and be consistent with that in every window.
Starting 11? I've written it down.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Hang on a sec. Oh, this is great news.
And here's your starting 11.
I'm not sure what's coming there.
It's not.
Baze, quick fire questions. And I'm looking forward to the first one because you would have played at some shocking grounds up and down the English pyramid. So first question, what is the worst ground you've played at?
And back in my day, most pitches weren't that good. God, like right now, I can't get away from Honiara. It's like, I remember playing there for Takara United and I hated it. Like the pitch, the weather, everything about it was horrible. Horrible place to go and try and play football.
Even worse than a bog in the middle of winter in Old Blighty.
I think they also lost 3-0 in that game. Was that the one where Benji Tottori ripped you apart, Baze?
No, he was playing for us that day. And it was 3-1.
It was 3-1.
Just saying. But we beat them, I think, 7-0 in the return leg on a cold night at Fred Taylor. A Trust Stadium, I think it was. Yeah. But yeah.
What is your pre-match meal?
I mean, back in the day, it was beans on toast. It was pretty simple, just beans on toast. Now, I don't think I have pre-match now.
Whatever you want.
I skip that now.
Yeah, buffet.
Try not to eat too much. Yeah.
What is the place that you want to go back to that you didn't get to visit while you're playing or coaching to really enjoy it properly?
One that stands out, Doyley might have been there in Nashville. Were you in Nashville?
No,
with Anthony? You didn't go there. So we went to Nashville and it's a place I've always wanted to go and like I love live music. And back then I was an assistant coach and we were just working all the time. And I never left the hotel apart from the training ground and stadium. So I'm in Nashville knowing that this super cool place is so close. I will go back there at one stage, but I've been to Nashville, but I never saw any of it. Yeah, hotel room, meeting room.
I thought you were going to say Honiara.
Yeah.
Pay his respects.
What club did you support growing up?
Oh, Liverpool. Easy.
Good man.
There we go. Yeah. Who is the coach that you look up to?
I can't look past Graham Taylor. Anybody that's worked with Graham, he just instills these values in you that live with you forever in life. So he would be the one that I always think about.
What is your golf handicap?
Too high. It'd be 18. Footballer's handicap 18.
It's mine as well.
Yeah.
All right, Baze, what is the movie you're going to go back and watch for the first time?
In my head, I'm thinking of all these comedies like Anchorman and all these things that I'd love to watch, Snatch and Lock, Stock, but I'd probably Shawshank, I reckon.
Yeah, nice.
Do you have any pre-match superstitions, Baze?
Nah, not really that superstitious. got routines that I probably do, but no, not really that superstitious anymore as a coach. I was as a player. I had a few as a player.
Who was your last All Whites roommate? Not in the team, obviously, but coaching staff-wise.
Man, we so we don't room. We don't room. Get our own rooms. So actually, haven't roomed with anybody for a while. The last time I was a player was at the night. So I had a couple of roomies. Glenn Moss, I roomed with Mossy for a while.
Mossy, he's clean.
Yeah, God. And Johnny Tambouris. I roomed with Johnny Tambouris for a while. Yeah. In fact, I tell you, actually, I tell a lie. At the recent Olympics, the last day Olympics, our flights got cancelled and we ended up in the Olympic Village, and they put us in rooms and we had to room with somebody, and I got stuck with Goffey.
Oh, no. Was he nude the whole time?
Oh, God, yeah.
Those pants, mate.
Me and Goffey.
Oh, disgusting.
So he would be my roomie.
What's the worst injury that you had during your career, Baze?
I was pretty lucky with injuries. I never had anything really serious, and actually, weirdly, I never had any muscular injuries. No, I never missed sort of 2 weeks with a hamstring or anything. But I did rip my medial ligament off my bone when I was 18. Ripped it right off the bone, and tried to play on. So I don't know if you know the medial's sort of that one there. And it was the first game of the season, and weirdly, it was Watford-Luton, so it was a local derby. And I went in for this tackle, and I felt it bad. And I tried to get up. I could hear the coach shouting at me, "Get up!" Well, it was about 20 minutes in, so I tried to get up and play on. And as I'm running, I could feel the bottom of my leg like flicking outwards. Oh. And then I played about 2 minutes. Luckily, I never touched the ball in that little period, because the surgeon said to me, if you'd have like passed the ball or gone in for a tackle, then your ankle might have hit you on your ear. Like there was just nothing holding it in place.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
Hopefully much more positively, Baze. What is your coffee order?
Americano, yeah. I like my coffee. Never-ending pot would be good as well. I drink too much of it.
And here's your starting 11.
Baze, awesome to see you, mate. And
thanks for having me.
On behalf of everybody here, we wish you all the best over the next 12 months. And we cannot wait. We literally cannot wait for the All Whites to return to the FIFA World Cup. It's been 16 years by the time they take to the field. I'm pretty confident about what this crop of players can do, Tom. How are you feeling, mate?
It's coming home.
It's coming home. Holy. I just want to see us progress from the pool play. But if you think we're going to win the damn thing, that's a great place to finish.
Exciting times. We've got some great games coming up over the next few windows. The rest of this year, great games. So, we're going to get a few good opportunities to keep testing ourselves. And obviously next year there'll be build-up games as well. And then the big show. Can't wait.
Oh, before we let you go, what are those games, mate?
So we've got Aussie, obviously home.
Well,
and
I know
away.
we've got Aussie. I know we've got Norway.
I have to be careful now what's actually come out.
What have you got? He's just looked over his shoulder at Tris.
All I say is they're all top 40 teams in the world.
Oh, brilliant.
So and November is, if we get November over the line, then that's going to be an awesome window as well.